ever asked yourself if you are actually living the life that you feel you are meant to be living, that you feel called to be living? This can be a tricky question because the ego can manipulate in a way that makes us doubt ourselves, doubt what we're doing. But it can also be a very useful question to ask if we ask it in the right spirit. Because there are many people who feel that they have been forced into a way of life that doesn't really resonate with their true calling. So I would like to share with you something that I wrote about this quite some time back. It is one of the emails, my weekly emails. It starts with a quote by the wonderful author Paulo Coelho in the book The Alchemist. So let me read. This candy merchant isn't making candy so that later he can travel or marry a shopkeeper's daughter. He's doing it because it's what he wants to do. The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho is as popular as it is because it takes us on a relatable journey, even though the protagonist is a shepherd boy. While it's almost certain that none of us are either shepherds or have been one in this lifetime, I'm sure that we can all relate to the accents, the peaks and the troughs of the young man's adventitious journey of emotions. We might even be able to recognize some of his comforting and not so comforting thoughts and insights, either because we have had them ourselves or have heard or read them. One such insight is the quote, "This candy merchant isn't making candy so that later he can travel or marry a shopkeeper's daughter. He's doing it because it's what he wants to do." I wonder how many of us are doing what we really want to do, doing what we have been called to do, doing because we have listened to that still small voice within and have chosen to follow it, sometimes despite the odds, including the opposition we might have had from well-meaning people. And I also wonder whether we may have stood in the way of others who are desperately trying to answer such a calling, muddying their minds with our learned fears, anxieties, and pragmatism. As I reflect on my life and observe the lives of others, I realize how most of us have been so obedient to the dictates of society, our families, and our communities. Even those of us who chose to rebel against these did so by becoming proxies for an equally limited worldview, reactively charging off in the opposite direction, but not necessarily doing what we really wanted to do. As long as we didn't do what our parents, our elders, our teachers, or any other significant person in our life wanted us to do, we felt victorious. In some cases, our victory was won by proving them wrong for writing us off certain professions or life choices. Either way, you could ask whether there was any real victory. Perhaps the short-term battle may have been won, but the long-term war, this war with our true calling, is either lost or continues unceasingly in the background of our languishing lives. Yet, there's always an opportunity to make a new choice, to be willing to be still enough to hear that voice of grace, of infinite knowing, the voice that only ever speaks entirely and unreservedly for our good, for our glory, for our actualization, which ultimately is for the good, the glory, and the actualization of the world. To be honest, I don't usually like using words like actualization, but I use them because most people seem to have an understanding of words like that. And this helps me scaffold the way I wish to communicate to them so that they have a realization of a more fundamental idea. And in this case, the idea, which I consider a truth, is that we live in a self-creating, self-organizing, infinitely intelligent, and all-encompassing universe, which some people might call God, whose every expression is unique and free of redundancy. In other words, we are each a unique expression of this infinite intelligence bearing our own unique signature. Each signature is as valid, as perfect, and as necessary as every other. When we ignore our unique and vital signature, we aid and abet the creation of an imperfect world as perceived through the eyes of the ego, personally and collectively. Now, you may argue that if it is only the ego that sees imperfection, isn't the problem really a matter of perception rather than whether we are living our unique signature? After all, if we were to look at the world through the mind of God, will we not see perfection? And you're right, of course. So then what's the problem? Well, none really. As long as we stay in the mind of God, look through the mind of God, the world will be perfect, as God had observed after each phase of the creation story. And I quote, "And God saw that it was good." This is from Genesis. The problem is, we don't stay in the mind of God, do we? So, might it not be useful to ask why? Why don't we stay in the mind of God? What are we doing or not doing that keeps us blocked, so to speak, from the mind of God? Might one of those things be that we actively work, think, speak, act against the mind of God? Because we have learned to. Because we are so addictively entrenched in the mindset of the ego. And one of the ways we remain so entrenched is by ignoring our calling and withholding our signature. But you know, when we answer our calling, we are less likely to be distracted and held hostage by the trappings of the world, the money we might make, the partnerships we might enter, the acquisitions we might secure. Instead, we gain a deeper understanding and embody ever more fully what it means to be, and I quote again, to be in this world, but not of this world. And this is from the Gospel of John. So, listening to the still small voice is not just to hear our calling or vocation or a way of life. It is also the ongoing practice of listening and being guided by this voice in everything we do. This voice that we might call our intuition. And by the way, that word has its origins in insight, spiritual perception, and under the tutelage of the divine. This voice cuts through the confusion and the noise of the ever frantic, ever terrified, separated self or ego. So, are you a candy maker? I'd like to finish with a little, very, very short prayer or meditation, if you like. And I hope you will join me in spirit. There's one voice that speaks uniquely to each of us, and I have heard it. May I be willing to listen to it. May I be willing to follow it even when I hear a louder voice that I've been trained to listen to and that pushes me in a different direction. One that appears more familiar and therefore feels safe. Let me instead walk with faith in the direction of the quiet, still voice, which only ever takes me along the path of love. Love that serves my good and the good of all else. And so, I want to finish by wishing you much love, and may your heart beat with the rhythms of peace. Hey everybody, I know it's so easy to forget, I do it myself so often, but please, if you did like this video, do hit the like button, do subscribe, do share, and most of all, please leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much.